Hello everyone, welcome to StudyIQ. We will continue our discussion on economy. We are in the module inflation. So far we have completed 2 sessions, and in the first session we have talked about the types of inflation. Like we have discussed about what is inflation. It is nothing but the increase in price level, right? And we have seen that the different types of inflation: demand pull inflation and cost push inflation. So in demand pull inflation, what you need to do is you need to see, is there any increase in demand? And the increase in demand is mainly because of increase in money supply. So we have seen, let's suppose this is I have told you in the x-axis, when you're drawing, you will go for national income, and on the y-axis you will go for price level, right? Price level. And this is the normal situation. Let's say this is the aggregate demand curve is downward sloping, and this is the aggregate supply. So if let's suppose this is a normal situation, there's the equilibrium point, this is the equilibrium price, and this is a national income. Okay, so what happens if demand increases, or in an economy, if the money supply is increasing, automatically purchasing power will increase, the demand will increase. That leads to demand pull inflation. So demand increase means demand curve shift rightward. So let me go for the rightward shift, demand curve shift rightward, and you can see here there is an increase in prices, right? But the good thing that actually happened here is, you see here there is an increase in national income. That means growth also there. So both will go together. When growth is there, inflation will also be there. So the positive is the unemployment will come down. Okay, so employment generation is there because of the growth, because value addition is actually happening. So the positive is there is a growth, there is a reduction in unemployment, there is a possibility of employment generation. So all these are the advantages, but the price level will go up. A lot of disadvantages are there that we will be talking about in this particular session. Okay, so this is what demand pull inflation. Then we have seen supply side inflation, that is a cost push inflation. Cost push inflation is because of the problem with respect to the supply, or the cost of production is increasing. Okay, so cost of production is increasing means supply will come down. So here demand increased, so demand curve shift rightward. When supply come down, supply curve shift leftward. So let's take this situation. Okay, so this is the national income. So here price level, and let's suppose this is the aggregate demand and aggregate supply. So this is the normal situation, just like what we have drawn before. So this is a normal situation. Now what happens when supply comes down, or when the cost of production is increasing? Okay, and then supply will be reduced. So supply curve shift leftward. So let me show here. Supply curve shift leftward. So this is the new point now. You can see here there is an increase, right? So this is what? Cost push inflation or supply side inflation. Now this is a problematic one. This affects the economy badly, because you can see here there is a reduction in growth, because supply is reduced. Supply is reduced means production is not there, value addition is not happening. So this is the worst situation, that price is going up, at the same time growth is also coming down. So this is not desirable. Okay, so when we talk about inflation, a moderate inflation is desirable. What inflation? Demand pull inflation. That is desirable, but this is not desirable. Supply side problems is not desirable. Okay, now in this session, and then we have discussed about different policies to tackle the inflation. We have seen from demand side also. Demand side, we have discussed about monetary policies. Okay, like what RBI will do, the measures that RBI used to take. Interest rates will increase, reserve requirements will increase. All those things we have discussed in case of to tackle inflation. And I've told you the prime objective of RBI is basically to tackle inflation or inflation targeting, especially after Urjit Patel Committee 2014. And then we have talked about from government side, that is the fiscal policies. Both are related to demand pull inflation. And then we have seen certain measures that you can take to control the supply side inflation or the cost push inflation. We have seen reducing imports, reducing exports, import the commodities which are in shortage, manage the supply chain. Okay, all this cold storages, all these long-term measures also we have discussed when we discussed about cost push inflation. So, and we have also seen the constraints faced by the government in tackling or controlling the inflation. So if you have missed out that 2 videos, just join this Telegram channel. You'll get all the videos over there. Get in touch with me in this Instagram ID. So if you need any classes related to SEBI or NABARD or RBI or Civil Services, you can get in touch with me here. Okay, so We will start with today's session. Here we are going to discuss about impact of inflation. So prelims, apart from asking you, what are the types of inflation, the causes of inflation, they can also ask you the impact of inflation. So for example, what is the impact on lender? What is the impact on borrower? What is the impact on economy? All this can be asked as an application question. So that is what I'm going to tell you here. We are not going to memorize anything. We are going to understand the logic, and you're going to connect that logic with all the questions which are going to be asked. Just like we have seen different measures that you have taken, and that also we have studied by using the concept only. We are not going to memorize anything. Okay. So here, impact of inflation, is it good or bad? There are good impacts, or there are good things and there are bad things. So both we have to discuss. Now, mostly when you see newspapers, you will see only the bad impacts. Mostly people write the negatives, right? But a moderate inflation is actually good. It won't lead to a recession. Okay. So to tackle that problem, moderate level of inflation is good. Moderate level of inflation is actually indicating the growth of economy. It indicates the demand of economy. It actually, showing that the productive capacity of the economy is increasing. So all these are the good things when we talk about inflation. But when we discuss about, when you're reading newspapers and all, mostly negative things are written. Here we are trying to understand, both positive as well as negative. So let's start with positive impacts. Positive impact. So first, as I have told you, a moderate level of inflation stimulate growth. So it increase growth. So from the growth perspective, it is good. Why? So I've already shown you here, there's the aggregate demand, there's the aggregate supply. So a moderate level of inflation, if it is caused due to demand, so what will happen? You can see here, there is an increase in prices, but you can see here, there is an increase in, this is national income, there is a price level. So prices increased, that is what you call as inflation, but at the same time national income or the growth is increased. So a moderate level of inflation is actually desirable. It is good as it promotes growth. Okay, so when it promotes growth, it automatically brings the employment generation. So unemployment will come down, poverty will come down. In all these ways, a moderate level of inflation is considered good and desirable in an economy. Okay. Next point, it actually increases the profit margin of the firms. So when the profit margin of the firms increase, that means when the price is increasing, there is a cost price, right? So cost price plus profit is actually the selling price or the market price. I'm not talking about taxes or anything here. That is something which is fixed. So here cost price plus profit. Now when this selling price is increasing, the cost price remaining the same. Let's suppose the raw material cost and all is not increasing. Selling price is increasing because of inflation. So where does the increase actually happen? It is a profit which is increased. So the firms will get advantage here. The profit of the firms will increase, which encourage them to produce more. That effectively will lead to more growth. That create employment opportunities. That create that can solve the problem of poverty. So profit margin of the firms increase, that increase the production. Then a moderate level of inflation also indicate that there is enough demand in the economy, right? So it shows there is a demand in the economy, and it is actually a positive market sentiment. So that force or that actually tempt the firms to invest more and enhance their productive capacity, because their profitability expectation is more now. If more is the demand, more production if you can have, then the profit will be more. So it shows high demand. So what happens from the firm's perspective, they expect more profit, because more the demand, more profit expectation from the firm side. So more investment will come, and that enhances the productive capacity, that enhances the complete infrastructure, and that will create job opportunities, and that will tackle the problem of unemployment, and it helps in removing poverty. Okay, so all these are connected. So moderate level of demand shows a positive market sentiment. I'm not writing here, you can take down that. It shows a positive market sentiment that increase the profitability expectations of the firms, that eventually force them to invest more in the productive capacity to enhance the production. That stimulates the growth, that solve the problem of unemployment and poverty. Now, next important concept that I want to discuss here is, we have discussed many different curves when we discussed about inequality. We have talked about Palma ratio, quintile ratio, we have talked about Lorentz curve, Gini coefficient, like that. One of the most important curve which is related to inflation and which connect unemployment and growth is Phillips Curve, which also used to ask in exams. So we're going to discuss about Phillips Curve. So it was given by A.W. Phillips. It was based on actual data which was collected over a period of 50 years during 1900 to 1950 from UK. So by collecting this data from this over a period of 50 years, he made this graph. Okay, he plotted the values. So I'll show you that graph here. So on the x-axis, he went for unemployment rate, and on the y-axis, inflation. So this is actually a graph which shows unemployment and inflation, the impact of inflation, in a way you can say. That is our topic only. Okay, so he plotted like this, and finally he made a curve like this. It goes like this. So you can see here, I just want to tell you this. So here inflation is high. Okay, at this point, if you take inflation is high, or let me draw with another ink. So at this point, if you see high inflation, but you see unemployment is low. At this point, you see inflation coming down, but unemployment is increasing. Compared to this, unemployment is increasing. Here inflation is very low, unemployment is very high. So there is a reverse correlation between inflation and unemployment. Inflation is high means what? I've already told you, it shows growth, right? So inflation is high means we have already seen here demand, supply, national income, price level. So inflation is high because of demand means there is a price level increase, so that is inflation. There is an increase in growth. Increase in growth means what? More employment generation. So more employment generation means what? Unemployment will come down. That is what exactly you can see here at this point. Okay, inflation is high, but growth is more, employment generation is more, so unemployment is less here. Now here inflation is low means demand is less, so production is less, so unemployment is more. So there is a reverse correlation, inversely proportional, or in any way what you can represent this. There is a reverse relationship between inflation and unemployment, and that's what Phillips curve. So what I want to tell you here is inflation is good for growth, but it has to be moderate. It should not be high inflation, right? High inflation is not desirable and it is not good. So basically inflation will always be accompanied with growth, or growth will be accompanied with inflation. Both will go together. So if you try to control inflation, you have to sacrifice on growth. Okay, so moderate level of inflation is always desirable. So now we will go for negative impacts. So negative impact. So first and most important point that I want to discuss is it actually deteriorates the standard of living. It affects the standard of living of the people. The reason is it affects the purchasing power of the people. How? The real income will come down. So the purchasing power of money will reduce. As I have told you, the value of money is reducing, right? So this last year, something which you bought at 100 rupees, some items which you bought at 100 rupees, if you need to buy this year, if there is a 10% inflation means you need to pay 110. See, the goods that you're buying is the same last year and this year. Money that you need to pay is high, that 100 to 110. That is what 10% inflation. That actually shows that value of money reduced, rather than you're saying that the prices of the commodities increased. It is better to understand from economic side is the value of money has come down. If your salary is not changing, let's suppose 100 rupee was your salary, this year also 100 rupees your salary. What happened? Your purchasing power came down, right? Last year 100 rupees you bought certain items. All those items you cannot buy now for 100 rupee. You need 110 rupee. Your salary is 100 means what is the ultimate end? The purchasing power came down. So it affects the standard of living, and if it affects the poor maximum. Okay, I'll show you how. Second negative impact is it is actually regressive in nature. Why it is regressive in nature? So second is regressive in nature. First is it affects the standard of living. How? The purchasing power came down. Now why I said it is regressive in nature? Because it affects the poor maximum. Now for example, you take two persons. One person is having an income of let's say 5,000. Another person has income having let's say 50,000. Okay, if there is an inflation means, let's say 10% inflation means, who will be affected more? The poor person will be affected more because he have to sacrifice or compromise on the essential items, the basic items here, the basic food items, etc. But this person, you know, when the income is more, the spending on food as a percentage of your income will be coming down. Okay, here this person might be, this lower income person might be spending the entire 5,000 for the food, but the 50,000 person may be also spending 5,000 or to the maximum 10,000. So when the inflation is there, the poor person is sacrificing on the food items or the basic items, okay, but the rich person is, you know, he have to compromise on the luxury only. So it actually affects the poor more. So that is why I told you it is regressive in nature. Okay, we have discussed about regressive tax system also before in the module of taxation. So this is regressive in nature. Third one, it increases inequality. So increase inequality. How it increases inequality? See, I have already told you as a positive of inflation that the profit margin of the firms increase. So the firm's profit increase, but the salary of the worker or the wages of the worker remain the same. And wages of the worker remaining the same means there is a problem, right? As I have told you, let's suppose 1,000 is the wage this year and there is an inflation. Okay, now 10% inflation means effectively he should get 1,100 to buy those same items which you have bought last year. Okay, but if your income is not increasing, you can't buy that. So here in that way also it is affecting the poor or the worker. Otherwise, the income of one group is increasing, the rich group is increasing, the capitalist is increasing, or the firms is increasing, the workers' income remain the same. Rather, it is decreasing in terms of real purchasing power. Although it is not decreasing in terms of the value, earlier also 1,000, now also 1,000, but it decreases in terms of real power, real purchasing power, real value of money is coming down. But the profit margin of the firms is increasing. In that way, inequality will increase in the economy. Next point, it actually affects the capital formation. What is capital formation and all those things we have discussed in one of our previous session. One session I have completely taken for capital formation, so I'm not getting into the details of it. I've shown you all the technicalities and everything in that particular session. So here, how it affects the capital formation? And if capital formation is affected, it is nothing but investment, right? When I talk about capital formation, it is all about investment. So investment is affected means, in what you can interpret, it actually affect the growth. So how is it actually going to happen? When there is inflation, as I have told you, the real income will come down, right? Real income will come down. Just before I have discussed this example, 1,000 you used to get before. Okay, so this 1,000 now if you need to get those same items, you need 1,100, 1,100, but you're not getting that, you're still getting 1,000. Okay, so actually the real income came down. If you need to buy those items which you have bought earlier, you need to spend 100 from your side. So real income actually came down. So what happened? Do you have any capacity to save now? You don't have any. Your capacity to save will reduce. So capacity to save will reduce. Don't you think it affects the savings? It affects the savings. Okay, so it actually affects the savings. On the other hand, when inflation is there, what will happen? It affects the real interest rate. What will happen with the real interest rate? Real interest rate will come down. For example, let's suppose you are lending 100 rupee. You are lending 100 rupees to lending 100 rupees to some person. So you gave to B at 10% interest. Okay, so that means if you are not lending this 100 rupee, you can buy 100 rupee item now. Now 10% interest rate you are getting for this. Next year you will get 110 from B. But if there is an inflation of 10%, you need to spend this entire 110 rupee this year to buy the same items which you have bought for 100 rupee last year. That means there is no advantage for you lending this money to B. Even though you are charging the 10% interest, the real interest is nothing here. So what do you mean by real interest? Real interest is the interest plus inflation. That is the real interest. Okay, so here real interest is actually came down, or real interest is less. So real interest rate decrease. So what will happen? Do you think you will be saving? You will be investing in financial instruments. You won't invest in bank or anything because the interest is coming down. You won't buy the bonds. The bond holders won't get any advantage if there is a inflation. Okay, maximum interest you get from the bonds is 7-8%, etc. If there is 10% inflation, actually there is a loss for you. So willingness to save decrease, so savings will decrease. So what will happen? These together, investment decrease. So I hope you understood. If there is an inflation, it affects the capital formation, thereby it is affecting the growth of the economy completely. How? Real income is reducing, capacity to save decrease. Real income is decreasing, so no capacity to save. Real interest rate is decreasing, there is no willingness also from your side to save. It is better to spend now rather than saving, because you are not fetching any interest, right? So what is that real rate of interest? Real rate of interest is actually the nominal interest rate, that is the interest that you're getting or you're paying. Nominal interest minus inflation. So the real rate of interest is actually nominal interest rate. That means the interest that is prevailing, that you're paying or that you are receiving, minus the impact of inflation. For example, let's say you are lending 100 rupee to someone, okay, at an interest rate of, let's say, 10%. How much you're supposed to get? 110 is what you're supposed to get. Now imagine there is an inflation also of 10%. So inflation of 10%. So that means this, let's suppose this is in 2019 and this is in 2020, right? Inflation 10% means the items which you bought, the basket of items which you bought for 100 rupee. Now if you need to buy the same item, how much you need to pay? You need to pay 110 rupee. So in 2020, even if you are getting 10% interest from that person, effectively you are not gaining anything, okay? Because whatever you could have bought for 100 rupee last year, now you are getting exactly the same item. So effectively you have no return. You would have got some return had it been 15% interest, or if it is slightly more than this 10. Okay, so let's say, see here you can see nominal interest minus inflation. What is the nominal interest here? 10. What is the inflation here? 10. So what is the effective interest? 0. There can be negative also sometimes. Interest can be 10. Okay, nominal interest is 10 and inflation is, let's say, 12. If 12% is inflation, means you are at loss. You are lending and you are at loss. Minus 2% loss actually will come. So this situation is not desirable. This is what you call as real rate of interest is not good. Okay, now what should happen? If it was 15, if interest you charging was 15%, then minus inflation, let's say 10, then at least you are getting 5%. Theoretically, when you're talking about, you are saying I'm getting 15% interest rate, but when it is adjusted with inflation, the actual return that you have is only 5%. So what I mean to tell you is real rate of interest is calculated upon inflation or adjusted it with inflation. So you can see here, in case of inflation, who is benefiting from here? See, this is the lender, okay, and let's say A is the lender and B is the borrower or the debtor. So who will benefit here? Actually, the debtor will benefit. The lender is not getting any benefit in inflation situation, right? So let's suppose inflation was 12%. Okay, so you are lending at 10% and inflation is 12%, means lender is at loss, debtor is gaining. Okay, so the same thing that you can connect it with bondholder. Bondholder, when you hold bond, you're actually giving money. Okay, so you are giving money and you're getting the bond, let's say 7% interest is on the bond and inflation is, let's say, 10%. So during inflation, what will happen? Bondholders will lose. Okay, bondholders will lose. That means lenders will be in disadvantageous position if there is inflation. Lenders will not benefit. The borrowers will benefit. The debtors will benefit. Okay, so lender or creditor lose and the borrower or the debtor gain in inflation situation. Okay, so this they used to ask in prelims: lender lose and the borrower gain. Now why import of gold is increasing? Import of gold is increasing because high inflation. You can see that time when high inflation was there, the import of gold was so high. So the reason is as I've told you here, inflation reduces the real rate of interest. So when the real rate of interest is less, means do you think people will invest in financial instruments? So people is not investing on financial instrument because they are not getting any return. You may say 10% interest on the instrument, but 10% inflation is there, means effectively there is no return, 0. Okay, so that is why people started investing in real estate and in gold, etc., to get some return that is also capturing the inflation. So the reason for import of gold, or the why import of gold is increased, is basically because of high inflation. The real rate of interest came down. People started losing the trust on financial investment. Okay, what government did? Government come up with inflation indexed bonds, right? Inflation indexed bonds. Okay, in 2013 government introduced inflation indexed bonds. Okay, so it was actually inflation is adjusted here. That means there will be an increase in real interest rate. It was like this, the interest rate in this bonds, as I've told you, the bond holders will lose during inflation, right? Bond holders are the creditors will lose. So here the actual interest rate under this interest rate equal to 1.5% plus inflation rate. So let's say 10% is the inflation, 11.5% will be the gain, okay, yield of the bond. Then there won't be any problem, so people can invest in the financial instrument because it is actually adjusted it with inflation. Some other scheme also was introduced, gold monetization scheme, sovereign gold bonds. What is sovereign gold bonds? Sovereign gold bonds. Okay, instead of physically buying golds or physically investing in gold, what you can do, you can actually buy these bonds. Now physically buying gold means that result in a shortage in the domestic supply, so you have to import, so import of gold will increase. So to discourage that, you get exactly the same return if you hold this bond. Okay, so there is a minimum 2 gram to maximum of 500 gram. Okay, let's say this is 10 gram of gold, this bond, let's say 25,000. Okay, and after maturity you will get the same value of gold. That maturity time, what is actually the value of gold, you will get exactly the same. So here gold plus 2% interest also will be paid. So here when you are buying physically gold, there are a lot of issues which are involved. There is a problem with quantity, you may not get exactly the same quantity, quality, purity, all these are issues. But here when you're going for sovereign gold bonds, you buy the bond, you invest in that as per that particular price, and upon maturity you get exactly the price of the gold. Okay, so here if it is for investment purpose, it is better rather than going after the gold. Okay, what is the impact of this? Demand for gold, the physical gold is actually came down because people prefer to buy gold as an investment. As your real interest is reducing, you are not investing in financial instrument. Now because of this, you can going for investment, and you can invest in gold itself rather than physically buying gold. So domestic demand of gold will come down. So that means you don't want to import, so import will reduce. So that's solve the problem of current account deficit. Okay, so balance of payment situation will improve. Then we have seen gold monetization scheme. Gold monetization scheme. See, you can keep gold with the government depository will be there, and you can keep there. You get a certificate. You can start a gold accounts in bonds, and based on that you can in that you'll get interest. Okay, so basically 2.5% interest you'll get. Okay, so and 2.5% interest, and apart from that, upon maturity you can get the gold or the equivalent value of gold. Okay, so you will get gold or equivalent value at that point of time. So here the idea is to reduce imports. How the imports is reduced? See, the demand for gold is actually not reduced here. Some people who hold gold as an investment, they can do this, so they will get this 2.5% interest, and this gold will be reused. So what will actually happen is domestic supply will increase. That reused gold can serve other purpose instead of importing. Okay, so the demand of gold is not tackled here. In the first two cases, demand for gold actually coming down. Here demand for gold is the same, but what actually happens, there is an increase in domestic supply of gold. Those people who are keeping gold idle, they can give it to the depository. You get the certificate. Upon maturity you get gold or value. That is not necessarily the same exact gold that you have deposited. So the problem with respect to this is you may not get exactly the same gold which you have given. So emotional sentiments and all is not considered here. Okay, if you have emotional attachment with the gold, you can't go with this because you may not get that. Okay, that is actually the problem with this. But if it was investment, if it is for investment purpose, you can go for gold monetization scheme, and you get equivalent amount of value or gold upon maturity. Apart from that, you used to get 2.5% interest also. So the advantage here also, import of gold will come down. So we have discussed this sovereign gold bonds, how impact come down, because demand for gold came down. Here demand for gold is there, but supply of gold actually increased. The domestic supply increased. Domestic supply means you don't want to import. So I would write here domestic supply increased, so import decreased. So current account deficit will come down. Obviously balance of payment situation will improve. Okay, we actually deviated from the topic. We were actually talking about negative impacts of inflation, right? So we will go back to inflation itself, and what is next? Yeah, I've told you already, a moderate level of inflation promote growth, but high level of inflation, it actually affect the growth. I've told you both will not go hand in hand. So high level of inflation means, what is the prime objective of RBI? RBI's prime objective is to inflation targeting, or to regulate prices, right? So RBI will definitely go after the prices. So how to control inflation? You have to go for contractionary, monetary as well as fiscal policy. You know already, I'm not discussing that now. So how is it affecting the growth? Affect growth because you have to go for contractionary, monetary as well as fiscal policy. What are the fiscal policies, contractionary policies? You will increase the tax, okay, and you will reduce the government expenditure. So these two will be followed. So there is a surplus budget that actually indicate contractionary fiscal policy. Contractionary monetary policy, you will increase CRR, reserve requirements you will increase, CRR, SLR you will increase. Also you will increase the interest rates, you will increase the bank rate, you will increase the repo rate, you will increase the reverse repo rate, you will increase the marginal standing facility, and all these rates will also be increased. So here profitability, if you are increasing the reserve requirements, the profitability of the banks will be affected, and if you are keeping the higher interest rate, it is going to affect the investment. In all way, growth is compromised. So it affects the capital formation, so it affects the growth because of contractionary policies. Now one more impact is it affects the resource allocation. We have discussed about resource allocation before. We have also discussed about capital formation. So we have discussed resource allocation in detail over there from government side as well as from market side. Government side resource allocation is the planning. Market side, market mechanism is there. So here what will happen? It distorts resource allocation. I'll tell you how. Distorts resource allocation. That means it diverts the resources to high profit areas. When inflation is there, I've told you the profit margin of the firms increase. So resources will be diverted to those areas where you get maximum profit. For example, let's suppose there are two companies, okay, A and B. Company A is making, let's suppose this pen, okay, and the company B is making a marker, okay. So cost of this cost price, including taxes. When I'm writing cost, I'm also talking about taxes. So let's say 9 rupee. The cost remain the same. Profit 1 rupee. So market price is now 10 and 10. Now imagine the situation. There is an inflation. Okay, inflation. So here price of pen is increased, but this one is not increased. So who's now going to gain more? This person the company who's producing the pen is going to gain more, and he is the efficient producer of the pen. So what this person will do is, he will try to, because after seeing this high profit, he will try to produce pen. So he will also shift to pen, but he may not be as efficient as the first company. So the cost price of this person may be 11 or maybe 11. See here it is 9 because it's most efficient, having better technologies. This person is entering into this market, seeing this profit margin. So cost price is high, don't have better technology, but he may get profit of 3 rupee here. So because 14 is the inflation. The first person is having, this person is having 5 profit. Now this person is having 3 profit. Still it is better than this 1 profit, right? See, he is doing the marker business, he is getting 1 rupee profit. Now here he is getting 3 rupee profit. So he actually changed to pen. That's what I told you. Resource, it distorts the resource allocation. Now here you can see the inefficient firm. B is actually inefficient. Still inefficient firm can make profit in a situation where inflation is there. It means if inflation is there, even an inefficient firm can also make profit. That affects resource allocation, that distorts resource allocation. But instead of, let's suppose this 14, instead of this is 12, let's say 12. So do you think this person will change now? No, he won't change, because cost of production is 11. Now 12 is what you're getting. So what is your profit? 1 rupee. Otherwise also he's getting 1 rupee profit. And that's why I told you moderate inflation is good. This high inflation actually distorts resources. Had it been 12, there won't be any problem, because he is not getting much different. Okay, here instead of 1 you are getting 3 if high inflation is there. But in otherwise both cases you are getting 1, means you stick to your better business, that is marker, which you already know. Okay. Now next important point which I want to tell you is it actually increases black money. As I've told you, the profit margin increases, profit increases. So you already know in taxation system we have discussed our system is progressive tax. So more the profit or more the earning, you need to pay more tax. Okay. So what will happen? The chances of paying taxes will come down, because tax slabs are different. Higher the income, higher tax rate you need to pay. So after certain income you won't pay tax. So that money will be accumulated as black money. So it also generates black money. Okay. See, in the previous case itself, 10 to 14, right? Increase was there. So what is the price increase? Price increase is, let's say, 40%. Price increases 40%, but profit in the first case 1 rupee, in now the second case 5 rupee, right? So 1 to 5, there is a 400% increase in profit. So you can see small variation in price is actually showing high variation in profit, and the taxes paid upon this profit is so high. So there is a chance that you will try to evade tax, and that lead to black money. Then it promote hoarding. Okay. Promote hoarding and speculation, because there is an expectation that the prices will still further rise more. So hoarding and speculation. And obviously it deteriorates balance of payment situation, because when inflation is there you have to import more and you will export less. So less export, more import affects the current account and also totally balance of payment situation. BOP situation will be compromised. So all these are the negative and positive impacts. You have to also know about the positive impacts. Apart from that, there are many negative impacts, almost all that you can see in all the articles. But positive impact, as I have told you, it promotes growth, it creates employment, it reduces unemployment. All these are the advantages. If you have any doubt, you can get in touch with me here. This is my Instagram ID. Join this Telegram channel for all my videos. Okay. So see you guys. Thank you.